Some of the greatest works of art are merely adaptations of other original works of art. I feel the word adaptation can sometimes condemn a work of art to live in the shadow of its original inspiration, but for these great works of art that happen to be adaptations, we usually aren't aware that they are. The Godfather is considered to be a cinematic masterpiece, but most aren't aware that it was originally a pulp novel. The universally acclaimed musical Wicked was actually a novel to begin with, but most people prefer the musical, right? This is still true in the world of video games, as the masterpiece series of games, The Witcher, is entirely based off of a series of Polish fantasy novels. I'd say the novels, though, are still quite well respected. There are a lot of stories waiting to inspire new masterpieces, but I see an opportunity like none other today to adapt a certain story into a video game. The market is there, the time is right, the potential for game mechanics is amazing. Let me introduce you to the story of Mistborn. Mistborn takes place on the ruined world of Scadrial. Ash mounts erupt massive clouds of ash into the atmosphere that gray the skies and cover the landscape in ash like a never-ending black blizzard. A powerful and mysterious figure, the Lord Ruler, has taken over the world and ruled for 1,000 years over what he calls the Final Empire. The Lord Ruler has enslaved the vast majority of people into a caste known as the Ska, a demoralized people who live together in hovels doing back-breaking labor and serving the caste of nobles. The nobles are the ruling class of people who side with the Lord Ruler, some of whom are blessed with the magic of Allomancy, a magic where, through ingesting metals, an Allomancer gains incredible powers. In Mistborn, we follow the story of a street urchin named Vin, who discovers that she has allomantic powers. She gets mentored by masters of Allomancy, and she gets roped into the biggest heist ever, stealing from the Lord Ruler himself. Imagine Ocean's 11 mixed with Avatar: The Last Airbender in a dystopian dark fantasy setting, and you'll have a pretty good idea of what to expect. Mistborn is a series of fantasy novels written by Brandon Sanderson. This is a guy who is so hyped up and popular in modern fantasy writing that he raised over $40 million on Kickstarter for a shadow drop of 4 of his books back in 2022. He then went on to run another Kickstarter for $15 million to turn his books into tabletop RPGs. This is the guy who's the face of modern fantasy, and it seems everything he touches turns to gold. Mistborn itself has sold over 10 million copies and is one of Sanderson's most beloved series. Time magazine listed Mistborn as one of the 100 greatest fantasy novels of all time, and in some markets, Mistborn outsold The Hunger Games on launch. Let's talk about what a Mistborn game would look like now. The most exciting thing to think about, in my opinion, is the implementation of the Allomancy magic system as game mechanics. There are a lot of allomantic powers, but the first that I want to talk about is pushing and pulling. Allomancers can push metal away from themselves using steel and pull metal towards themselves using iron. Think like the Force in Star Wars, except the lines of force are restricted to only pushing outward or pulling inward from your current position. You can't push or pull something or somebody sideways. Think like a magnetic attraction or repulsion between you and the metallic object. The Allomancers in Mistborn use this to fly by pushing metal coins into the ground beneath them, and the force of the coin pushing on the ground launches them, the Allomancer, up into the air. They also will push and pull on doorknobs, window lashes, and streetlights as they fly through cities on secret missions, swinging around. This has the potential to look like a movement system with a high skill ceiling and thrills as players quickly look around to find out where they can jump or swing next around a city of Gothic architecture. An entire magic parkour system that rewards players for skillfully solving puzzles of optimal movement while they're escaping guards during a burglary of a nobleman's keep. The best comparisons I can make to what this might look like in a video game are these fan-made Mistborn games I've been showing you. Probably the next closest thing that exists are the movement systems in these Attack on Titan games, where a player uses targeted grappling hooks to swing and fly through the air consistently. A simpler implementation of this mechanic might end up looking like the newer Spider-Man games, though this is where the targeting of the objects to swing off of is highly assisted. So, movement is not the only innovative game mechanic that Allomancy presents, though. Pushing and pulling on metal during combat is very interesting when you consider that fantasy characters are wearing metal a lot of the time. They got armor, belt buckles, they're holding swords, or they're shooting arrows. most people and objects in combat would able to be manipulated. I'm picturing combat looking like one of the Middle-earth or Batman games where you could be fighting lots of guys at once, but instead of making it a game where you mash the attack button to win, we could revolutionize the genre through a well-executed physics-based magic system. So pushing and pulling aren't the only thing Allomancers can do. Allomancers who use pewter can increase the strength of their muscles and bones, and this would easily be a buff you could apply during in-game combat, allowing you to resist damage, status effects, and deal more damage. In addition to increasing your outward abilities, Allomancers can increase their inward abilities, their senses, by using tin, allowing them to see with high detail and at incredible distances, and hear with extreme sensitivity. I foresee this as a great binocular-style utility in-game for looking around the city with high detail during nighttime, and for helping out during stealth missions by allowing players to see or hear incoming guards or listen in on conversations between nobles and guards to learn secrets that might lead to rewards or branching paths in the story. Allomancy even allows for the manipulation of emotions by taking an existing emotion and intensifying it using zinc, or dampening it using brass. This would be perfect for influencing dialogue tree options for RPG-style conversations. Imagine if, before a character makes an important decision in a cutscene, you could read their emotions and change them to alter the course of the story. This would probably be implemented through a sort of quick control stick UI you could bring up on targeting a character and selecting the emotions you want to intensify and dampen. You could even use this throughout normal gameplay to gain discounts at stores or goad guards into anger, but this would probably be especially interesting to see how you could change the story without your character having to even say a word or be in the same room as the person you're manipulating. Some of the last features of Allomancy I'll mention here are that Allomancy is normally invisible. The only way you can see allomantic forces operating on something is if you use bronze, which grants vision of Allomancy. This also makes using Allomancy risky if you want to avoid detection, but Allomancers can expend copper to hide their allomantic pulses. This will add a stealth component to the game, which will cost the player resources to use Allomancy without detection, but will allow the player to search for other Allomancers that may be pursuing them. And the absolute very last bit of Allomancy I'll discuss, that is not a spoiler, is that if an Allomancer uses a rare metal, they gain the ability to see images of the near future. I totally see this as bullet time from the Matrix, where players can get prescient images of where attacks are coming from and then counter or dodge them in a really cool animation. So there is clearly a ton of material to work with when we talk about Allomancy becoming awesome video game mechanics. And I think it's not going to be overwhelmingly complex, because part of the main character's arc in the book is she starts from knowing very little to learning all of Allomancy, and I think that's what the progression will be in the game as well for the player. I believe if this is executed well, we're going to trap lightning in a bottle and eschew a lot of the tropes that make tons of modern RPGs feel so samey and boring, like uninspired copies of Skyrim or GTA for the 50th time. So why of all times make a Mistborn video game right now? It came out in 2006. What's the deal with that? A case study I want to point out for this is a game called Hogwarts Legacy. You may have heard of it. It came out in 2023. It was wildly successful, developed by Avalanche Software, and they faithfully adapted the world of Harry Potter into an RPG that was made for teens and adults who grew up with Harry Potter. The game was not a masterpiece by any means, but it was pretty good. I enjoyed it myself. I got an 81 on Metacritic. It still sold over 40 million copies, and that was by the end of 2025, and it grossed over $1 billion in revenue. Wow. To top all of this off, it was the studio's first open-world fantasy RPG they ever made. For the decade before Hogwarts Legacy, Avalanche had just been making licensed platformer and adventure games for Disney, including Disney Infinity. So what I'm asking us is, what happens if we take a similarly beloved series from a now popular author with a much more interesting magic system, more mature themes, and give it to a studio who is a veteran fantasy RPG developer? I think we're going to have another Witcher. In game development, execution is everything. So it still depends on who they get working on the game, but we're in a particularly unique position here. Sanderson isn't hurting for money. He's hyper-selective with whom he lets touch his intellectual property. He has received authors to adapt his books for a long time now, and while he hasn't disclosed a particular number, Sanderson has hinted that the budgets he is being offered to adapt one of his books into a TV show are huge, and yet he hasn't accepted the offers. It might take some time to find the right studio, but we can rest assured Mistborn will not end up in the hands of an incompetent game studio that will rush the project for a quick buck. Sanderson himself is highly invested in getting his work adapted correctly, and has mentioned before that he has dedicated time as a consultant on film sets when other adaptations of his work were being experimented with. Suffice to say, when Mistborn gets turned into a video game, Sanderson will be working on it 100%. Additionally, Sanderson is writing more books in the Mistborn series that are slated to be released in 2028, 2029, and 2030. If a Mistborn game starts production soon, cross-promotion with the new books is possible, and that would be a really big incentive for a studio or publisher to get working on it soon. Lastly, in a recent public letter to his community, Sanderson directly asked large indie and AAA game studios to contact him about creating a Mistborn video game right now. I might be injecting a little bit too much hopium, but all of the stars are aligning right now to have it come out and have it be good. Okay guys, here's my bold claim. The Mistborn video game is going to come out, and it's going to be a cultural touchstone. It's going to be decade defining. I don't think it's going to be on the same level of Final Fantasy VII, where they combined excellent execution with new technology that was groundbreaking, but it's going to be an example of a very well refined dark fantasy RPG. Like a Clair Obscur Expedition 33. This genre, the dark fantasy tag in particular on Steam, has been responsible for some of the most successful and acclaimed games over the past 10 years. I did some research and figured out that since 2016, 4% of Steam games, new releases, are tagged under dark fantasy. We can assume that if this genre is nothing special, it should represent 4% of the best games. It should match up, right? But this isn't the case. When you look at Metacritic's top 10 games for each year, we should be expecting an average of 0.4 dark fantasy games appearing on each top 10 list. But instead we get 2.5 dark fantasy games on average on each top 10 list for the past 10 years. Dark fantasy is vastly overperforming and is vastly overrepresented among the best games that are coming out over the past decade. All scoring over 90 on Metacritic, we've gotten Elden Ring, Sekiro, Baldur's Gate 3, Metaphor Refant Zero, Hades 2, Divinity Original Sin 2, Clair Obscur Expedition 33. I could go on. Since the inception of the Game Awards 12 years ago, 7 out of the 12 Game of the Year awards have been given to dark fantasy RPGs. We have so many veteran developers in the industry that have paved the way for the genre and have created some of the greatest video games of all time just in the past decade. These developers are seasoned. They will absolutely nail a Mistborn adaptation. So this is my plea to you, all the people who watch me and are working in the game industry. Please contact one of Sanderson's representatives if you think you could make this game. We are all counting on you to make something awesome. And I'll see you at the Game Awards when you win Game of the Year.